He said the millions and millions of dollars you're spending, they have an effect. When a lot of people in Ohio or any other state don't really know a whole lot about Santorum, a few debates and so forth, what you can do when you can outspend somebody 8, 10, 12, 6 to 1 is define them. You define them. And what Romney has done is he has defined every one of his opponents as liberals, as big government Washington insider liberals. Now, before this Republican primary, would you have really thought of Newt Gingrich as a big government liberal? Would you really have thought of Santorum as a big government liberal, even though you have disputes with certain of their comments and vote? But as a whole, when you take the measure of the person, no, you wouldn't. The big government liberal, you would think, is the former governor of Massachusetts who created Romney Care and who was trashing Ronald Reagan in the early 90s, mid-90s, and embracing Ted Kennedy as recently as 2006 as a collaborator on Romney Care. But what you're able to do when you can hugely outspend your opponents is you define them and you define yourself. So he is a conservative businessman. That's how he's defining himself. And his opponents are big government liberal insiders. Now, it's interesting that virtually every insider in Washington, D.C., every insider inside the Beltway has endorsed explicitly or indirectly Mitt Romney. Right? So he's actually the insider's candidate. He's the establishment's candidate. But when you go into a state where people aren't really paying attention to every little nuance and detail of what's going on, and you spend millions of dollars just hammering away. This guy's been in Washington all this time. He's a Washington guy. And you can barely respond. That's how you close the gap from 10 to 12 points. But you do something else. You tick off a lot of people. The Newt Gingrich supporters do not believe Newt Gingrich is a big liberal Washington insider because they know he's despised by the Washington insiders and they know he's not a liberal. He may have a few goofy ideas, but he's not a liberal. The Rick Santorum supporters know full well that Santorum is hated by the Washington insiders. Just listen how they talk about him. And he's not a big government guy. There are some votes that I disagree with. There's no question about that. And yet, the Santorum people are not going to accept the kind of trashing of Santorum. The Gingrich people are not going to accept the kind of trashing of Gingrich that's going on without being ticked off. And the Romney people are betting, and all their supporters and insiders are betting, that because you'll have nowhere else to go, you're going to turn out with enthusiasm, bring your family and friends and coworkers and neighbors and anybody you can get a hand on, and march to that voting precinct on Election Day, be the first one there to defeat Obama. And yet I'm concerned that there's a certain percentage of our people who won't do that. Because they may not have really known about Romney, but after all those ads run in a particular state and you're emotionally and intellectually vested in a particular candidate that's being trashed, it's hard to recover from that. And you can even see it with some of the former candidates. Fred Thompson has been in Tennessee campaigning for Newt Gingrich. Fred Thompson, he won't say this, but I can tell. He hasn't said this to me either, but I can tell. He despises Mitt Romney. And Fred Thompson doesn't despise anybody. Rudy Giuliani can't stand Mitt Romney. I don't know Rudy. I know him from meeting him, talking to him briefly, but I mean very briefly. We're not bosom buddies. But he can't stand him. And by the way, there are people out there who can't stand Santorum and Newt and Ron Paul. I get all that too, but I'm talking about if you think you're going to lock up the nomination just by trashing and burning, and you may, The fact of the matter is, you're going to tick off a lot of people. And I'm concerned that he's ticked off a whole lot of people. And I hope that that damage can be fixed if he's the nominee, because it is so crucial that Obama be defeated. And I personally happen to think, just me, that Romney's, of the remaining candidates, one of the weaker ones. Because this advantage in money that he has now will not be there in the general election. He will be the target of the attacks. Over at Red State, a fella has a pretty good piece up there. I'll just say, you can go there and read it yourself. He says, in essence, Romney can buy conservatives. You know, with these campaign ads and so forth. But can he persuasively argue for conservative principles if he's nominated? That's the problem, he says.